And so to our final session of the day. Our Head of Research and Insight, Kathryn Courtenay-Evans, will be drawing learnings from a recent research project to share key considerations for you as APAC wellbeing leads for the year ahead.
Welcome to the last session of the APAC conference. My name is Kathryn Courtenay-Evans. I am the Insight and Research Director for This Can Happen, and I'm delighted to be here with you for this last session. I hope you found the sessions that you've seen over today really useful, and it's given you a look into topics that people are working on at the moment, and hopefully it's given you some ideas of what you might like to tackle next and what conversations that you might want to be doing with your people and with some of the people you're supporting. For me, it's been really interesting to learn more about what's been done to support our colleagues with neurodiversity needs, but also to look at some of the exciting changes that hopefully are coming, thinking about menopause and how to support people better in that space. And I think one thing that's clear is there isn't one answer to all of these challenges, but lots of different approaches can actually help lots of different people. So what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about the information that we've been learning as an organisation from people that have been tackling some of their global challenges. And I'm going to do this from a place of learning, I think, because we've been learning on this journey with yourselves through one of our projects, which is running global scorecards. Now, this came about 2 years ago because a number of our clients are really struggling with what to do next and understanding where to use scarce resources. They were talking to us about how do you gain consistency when you're a big organisation where you've got global needs as well as local market needs. How can you celebrate and share best practice? How do we know that we're doing well? How can we share, our performance and make a difference? And also, how can we learn from our peers? So over the last 18 months, myself and some colleagues have been doing scorecard interviews. And what I wanted to share with you today was some of the learnings from those processes. So hopefully you can go forward and actually make some more changes yourself. So to start with what we've been hearing generally on more of a global aspect, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the Asia market in more detail. What's really interesting when looking at global mental health strategy is that a lot of it seems to stem from where the resources are owned within the organisation. And we know through lots of discussions with our clients that no one organisation is the same in this respect. And actually these things change over time. So for example, one organisation, mental wellbeing, might be owned by the pay and benefits team. In another organisation, it might sit within the HR team. For maybe an organisation that's more based in maybe manufacturing construction, logically, it might sit more within health and safety. But what we do know is that organisations that have a starting point for mental wellbeing, often it can drive the agenda of what gets done and why it gets done, and can actually change the feel and the narrative of that strategy. The other key theme we've been hearing is about dedicated resources. What dedicated resources do you have, and what dedicated resources would you like to have? And again, that's really different by organisation. Some organisations have huge amounts of dedicated resources. They have it interlinked from a global perspective and a local perspective. Other organisations do loads of great work, but actually they're incredibly lean in their resources. So they might have a couple of people that actually do mental wellbeing as part of what we call a side of the desk job. So they have another function. They might be an auditor, for example, and actually mental wellbeing is a passion that they have, and therefore they do it as part of their everyday work. Another key theme that came out is why are some of the leads of people that we work with actually in these roles themselves? And again, that's really interesting and drives the energy behind some of the initiatives that we see. So we see a lot that people have lived experience personally or within their community, and therefore they feel they want to make a difference and they want to share and make a difference to their employees. They might have recently employed some team members, but they didn't really have the right skill set to manage, and therefore they go off and they do some awareness and education, or they're just passionate about the topic and they've seen the difference they can make. One of the really interesting challenges that people also talked to us about was how do you get global messaging out there? So if you've got a big organisation that's maybe got 6 or 7 regions and you've got a global team that's heading the messaging that you want to get out there, how do you make it consistent? But how do you also make it consistent so you feel like in your local market that you're actually being listened to for your particular needs? And again, this isn't easy. And again, there's no right or wrong answer on how you do this. And we've been seeing lots of interesting ways that people have been tackling this. This also interlinks with how do you make the messaging consistent. So if you've got a big global message that you want to get out there around mental well-being, how do you make the local market messaging actually interlink with the global? So there's some of the global trends that we've been hearing, and all of them are pretty big topics that people are struggling with and making good headway on. We're using lots of creative and innovative ways of actually tackling some of the feedback that they're getting from their people. And we always say that anything to do with mental well-being, it is a journey. Everyone is on a different journey with it, meeting the needs of their people. And actually, what you might be doing this year might be very different from what you decide to do next year based on, the activities you've done to date. So if we move on to think a little bit more about APAC itself, what have we been hearing that's potentially different against the global picture for the APAC market? I think in this respect, what's been really interesting in some of the interviews and the people that we've been talking to and the HR leads is that there is a huge passion for mental well-being in this space. Organisations really want to make a difference and they really want to listen. And one thing that struck me when we were actually doing the work on this is that there's a really strong theme around giving back coming from the Asia market. And this could be led by cultural needs. It could be led by the individuals that are leading the change within organizations, but it stood out differently than some of the other markets, and that actually the way that the strategies and the way that the initiatives were put together, throughout a lot of them, there was this theme about, well, how can we give back? How can we give back to our people? How can we give back to the local communities? And how can we actually show that we're making a difference and share resources? And this was really interesting because some of the initiatives that we heard about that came from the starting place of wanting to give back really had a very different feel than potentially if you were thinking about, well, purely what's the return on investment. So we saw wonderful case studies of working with local charities, of supporting startup organisations, supporting people who've had personal tragedies within their lives to actually bring them into the workplace and actually give them a strong structure to start from. So loads of amazing stories. If you think about best practice potentially and communicating some of these experiences, really will make lovely stories to go out on a global network, thinking about, what's happened locally. The other thing that was quite interesting was more of a focus on differences by generations in this market, potentially. And also the feeling around that there's a real difference in the openness to talking about mental well-being by generations and potentially the perception of stigma within families. And again, looking at some of the initiatives people have been doing in this area, it's been really interesting seeing how they've been gently trying to keep the conversation going with particularly some of the older generations, where there's potentially more stigma around talking about mental well-being and within family networks than with other generations. And some of the research that we did actually showed that some of the younger generations were struggling a little bit with this because they were in a place where actually they were very happy to talk about this within their peer groups and within the organization, but actually they were struggling with, they wanted to disclose some personal information to actually feel comfortable talking about their families with it. So some really lovely initiatives about talking about how do you raise awareness and make people more open to these topics when potentially they've grown up feeling actually it's something you should not discuss at all. The other thing that was really interesting in the Asia market was how powerful it was to have interviews with people with lived experience from a senior level within the organisation. And again, we did some lovely examples of two very senior directors in a global organisation who actually made massive strides within their organisation by talking about their personal stories. And I know this is something that you'll see throughout, our conferences, and we've seen a lot of today. But in that market as well, that helped to remove some of the stigma to see a very senior person talking about their own battles with an aspect of mental well-being and actually make it be all right to talk about it. So moving on, what are some of the overarching themes that we've been hearing then that actually maybe you could take away and consider yourselves within the organisations? And I think for us looking at the Asia market, it really is important to think about what is the best approach that's right for your people and that supports where you are in your journey. This might mean taking elements of the global aspect and actually maybe nuancing it for your local market, or doing it slightly different in the communication style, so that people feel it's, they're being listened to and actually their needs are being understood. It might be interesting for you to think about what was your starting point as a team, maybe, or as an organization, for putting together your mental health strategy. Who was some of the key people that were integral to starting the discussion, and what was their focus, and has that actually changed the journey you've been on? And if it has it been positive, or actually do you need to readdress some of it and add some additional resources, maybe to think about where you are now? It'd be really lovely to maybe consider in your local market what you've done differently, potentially from the global perspective, and how can you communicate that upwards and outwards and celebrate it. Some other lovely examples we've had is where there's been some local awards actually given to some initiatives, and actually the global team didn't know about it whatsoever. And that would be lovely to think about how you upwardly can communicate the good work that you're doing. The other thing maybe to consider as well is, do you have anyone else within the market that you can actually get to be advocates and share your information, thinking about maybe some of the wider network groups, or the trade groups that you can go for, or are there any awards that you could go for to celebrate all the good work you're doing? All of this, try and tie it together and actually keep you moving forward on your journey. So they were the key themes. So I hope it's been interesting learning a little bit about the global themes we'll be hearing, and some of the differences from the Asia market. So for me, all I'd like to say is thank you so much for all of you for listening today. If we've done our job right in pulling together the content, I hope that there's 2 or 3 things that have resonated with you, that you've decided, I'm going to take this forward and look at it for my area, for my team. And if you've done that and you do one thing differently, I think we've been a success, and that hopefully there will be some changes to your people going forward. So all it leaves me to say now is thank you very much for listening. It's been lovely to spend this time with you, and hope to see you at one of our future conferences or our events. Thank you very much.
And with that comes the end of our APAC conference. Thank you so much for joining, for interacting, and we really hope that you gained useful insights over the course of the sessions. With thanks again to our partners A&O Sherman, GSK, Haleon, and the Weber Shandwick Collective, who enable us to put on these conferences. Please do get in touch with us about anything we can help you with. I'm also looking forward to meeting many of you in person in Singapore in February 2025. You will see a link in the chat box for you to register your interest, and we will be in touch about more. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.